Sorry, that should have happened before. Go ahead. 4 years. You there? Okay, we'll just keep rolling. Yeah, this is so essential. And I think in the day and age of HGTV, where you watch people do all kinds of awesome things, or social media, you know, we can get a picture for someone else's journey. This is true in all of life. Not that I've got it all figured out, but it's just, I think with the proliferation of social media right now, it's so easy to play the comparison game. Oh, in order to be good at this, I need to look this way, act this way, spend money this way. And that's not true as a real estate salesperson. That's not true as a real estate investor. That's not true as a parent. That's not true as a, you know, there's so many categories where getting other person-itis is just wholly counterproductive.
Remember when you're watching a show like any of those fixing up shows, any TV show, it's like an hour long, well, 45 is the commercials.
Right.
You know how much time they don't put on that camera?
Oh yeah, of course, of course. That's right. Rose-colored lenses, right? But I think that for me, understanding it's okay that I don't know how to do everything, and it's okay that I have young children, and that puts limitations on my life, has helped me make better decisions, even if it means growing more slowly than some might. All right, getting the house in order. So this is kind of foundational. Before, Chris, I'm going to mute you again. Before investing, these are important categories to address. Who are the key stakeholders? Who stands to be most impacted by this path? Family, spouse, partner, children, etc. The accountability factor that comes with that is huge, and not being on the same page as your key stakeholders in this journey is a huge mistake. So whether you're married, whether you've got a close friend, the path towards real estate investing is a high commitment journey, and choosing to do so with buy-in and the input, and devil's advocate. Gary Keller talks about black hat thinking. You want someone poking holes. You know, the person who's interested in this might be a high DI, like, yeah, what's possible? I heard about someone who did this, and we can be, you know, the sky's the limit. And you need someone saying, okay, I love you, I'm with you, but what about, ooh, good questions. And so find a friend to wrestle through these ideas with. The financial foundation part. I'm in some ways a Dave Ramsey guy, though obviously not fully because of the way that I'm teaching this class. But don't do this out of order. Don't buy an investment home before you have an emergency fund. I would discourage from buying an investment property when you've got substantial high interest debt. We committed to getting debt free before making this, and you know, everyone's on a different journey, but I think the risks you're exposing yourself to in purchasing more property means that you want to be thoughtful and not unconscious of the risks that you're taking there. Goal setting relative to real estate investing. So thinking about time horizons. What can you do now? So within the next 2 years, okay, all right, having 16 doors, that feels daunting, or having $60,000 a year in income, that feels daunting. What can you do now? Can you acquire one property? Can you establish one emergency, you know, a strong base emergency fund? Can you raise your credit? You know, it's kind of like the you know, talk with a loan officer before you go buy a home. What are the things that you can do now if you're not poised? Midterm, and this is kind of my focus. What keeps me moving forward? What are you focusing on? For me, I want to buy one property a year. That's not a forever goal. That's not something I can necessarily do this instant. But that's the focus. And then what might a someday goal be as well? That's the SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. You've probably seen that before. Identifying your niche, depending on who you ask. There's actually a lot of different ways to invest in real estate. Residential, I think, is where most people think first. There's apartment, which is a form of residential, but it requires different type of financing, different type of underwriting, a much different process. If you have questions about larger multifamily projects, which I have not personally done, Dee, have you done a larger multifamily?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
My husband's business has done commercial.
Okay.
So
You're familiar with it. You've been around it. Andy Alamini is a great resource. This is kind of his lane. I think he has 46 doors himself. He doesn't do massive apartments, but he does the 12, the 16, the 20 unit, and those are his clients. He's a good resource if you can find him. Commercial, that's the retail. We have a retail space, which is kind of fun. Storage. Those are typically the apartment, commercial, industrial stuff is going to be more expensive. REITs, anyone know what a REIT stands for? Real estate investment trust. You want to try to break down what a REIT is?
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I've looked into them. It just looks like a stock market for a portfolio.
Yeah, that's basically true. It's, hey, I don't want to buy a house and manage it myself, or I don't have enough money to do that, but I'm buying into a fund that is being managed by a group that is buying and selling real estate within it. It's typically a pool of them. It's not just, oh, do you want to invest in this single house project? They'll CrowdStreet and Roof Stock. Like there's a lot of different alternative approaches to buying into real assets without plugging in that way. I don't have personal experience with those. And just some of these categories on the side, these, as you think about your asset class, hang on a second, make sure I'm not missing someone. Your cash flow needs, how much management hassle do you want to, it's one thing to manage a couple of single family properties. It's another thing to manage a 44 unit apartment complex. That's a different set of skills. That's a different time commitment, probably a different type of tenant. And obviously commercial, industrial, retail, there are different economic drivers that impact those. Commercial retail stuff can be some of the lowest hassle factor stuff once you have them set up, because they maintain the property, pay the taxes, that sort of thing. Triple net leases, exactly. So identifying your niche, identifying your strategy. I'm a buy and hold investor. My time horizon is forever, which doesn't mean that I'll never sell a property, but I'm not acquiring properties with the plan of selling them or needing to sell it in order for the deal to work. They say that a good investment involves having a couple exit strategies. It's not just, I do it this way. It's, oh, if things go south, I could also do this. I'm a buy and hold investor. You can do a flip or a live-in flip. Live-in flip is when you buy the house, fix it up, and it appreciates, and you move and you make your money and move on. The tax implications of doing that are better if you don't do it too fast. There's a house hack, which is what we did. That's buying a property, living in a portion of it, renting out a portion of it. We did it just to save money on our expenses, and then it turned into something. But that's we got in at 5% using a conventional product, whereas as a more traditional investor, you're going to be spending 20 or 25% in order to get in. I was going to ask what a BRRRR is, but you can see it right here. This is kind of a sort of a flip sub strategy where you buy a property, you fix it up, you rent it out, you refinance it. So you're typically going to be buying with hard money or private money at a high interest rate that you wouldn't want to keep for the long haul. You fix it up and you rent it so that its value, let's say you buy a $75,000 home that needs plenty of work and it is vacant. You fix it up, you put a new roof on it, you invest money so that you're in at, say, 100 all in purchase price and rehab. And then it appraises at 150 in a conventional product. And you get a decent tenant in there, appraises at 150, you can take that money out, and different lenders are going to be doing it differently, but you can do a 75 or 80% loan to value, take the difference out and reinvest it in your next property. I've never done this. I'm intrigued by it. I know people who do, but it can be a great way to basically recycle your money if you do it the right way. And the nice thing about being a realtor doing the BRRRR involves more different skills, and you're more likely to have more of those skills if you're a realtor, being around the deal, knowing a property's real value, which as a buy and hold investor, you can kind of get away with not knowing the value quite as much, if I'm being honest. Turnkey property versus value add or rehab, those are different approaches. My preference is to go light rehab, something that needs a facelift or paint, fresh appliances, new water heat, stuff where I can spend $5,000 and put it in a better position, but I'm not up on the roof. I'm not changing sewer lines or anything like that. And then syndication is, anyone know what a syndication is?
Like a bunch of investors or a handful of investors pulling together for a large project.
Right.
Like a giant apartment complex.
Yes. Yep. So Preston answered large, I was approached by a friend who had an $8 million apartment, 200 unit apartment complex in Oklahoma. They can't afford it. Nobody that they knows can afford it, but with our powers combined, maybe, and I'm not doing it. Typically there's a minimum buy-in, but you can make money putting that deal together, or you can make money being a limited partner in a deal like that as well. That's like brown belt, black belt status in the world of real estate. Don't start there. Yeah, and experience. There's a lot of ways to do that wrong, and a lot of ways to go to jail by doing that wrong. So be careful out there, friends. All right. This is a little bit more into the process. This is a helpful acronym, doing the right activities towards investing in real estate. Take a lap. Starts with leads. Where are you getting your leads from? We obviously know more than most the sources out there, but off-market leads are a big opportunity in this market. Alternative methods, particularly for off-market deals. I don't know what D4 dollar. I don't know if I put that in. Drive for dollars. That's right. I put it in at one point. Driving for dollars. So that's driving through a community and looking for the house with the 18-inch grass and the roof that looks like it's about to cave in. It's what's that?
I did that 2 days ago.
Nice. It's looking for opportunity when there's not a for sale sign in the yard. Typically that opportunity is found in projects or, a house that requires plenty of work, and it's going to require effort, money, a game plan in order to get there. That's not exclusively true, but that is a path. Direct mail campaigns, farming in a community. Hey, you've seen the bandit signs, all that good stuff. County records, tax records, expireds, divorce. There's lots of different places to find information where people might feel motivated to sell. I am not an advocate in any way for being predatory in those sorts of scenarios, but good work involves solving people's problems. When you're helping someone buy a home, you're helping them solve a problem. If someone needs to get out of a house, you're helping them solve that problem, and treating them well along the way. Analysis. What are your criteria? What are the key metrics that and we're gonna take a glance at this, and then next week or in 2 weeks, we're gonna do a much deeper dive on what does analysis look like. One of your projects is going to be to bring a property that we'll analyze together in real time, which is always fun. Then the pursuit, write the offer, obtain the financing, and move through the process. Forgive me. Skills and traits associated with each of those processes. And this is ABCs, but it's worth hitting on. You need to have a structure for identifying and nurturing lead flow. Most agents don't do this well in their businesses to help sell. So I'm assuming most investors don't do this particularly well. I've only ever bought off the MLS personally. So I'm not Mr. Answer Man on all of these processes. But if you are looking to really build a business out of this, having a game plan about what your lead flow looks like is essential. And then setting them up on a smart plan, like the ways that you seek to generate listings. Parallels for seeking to generate listings and find properties to invest in are eerily similar. And so just encouragement there. Boldness and a warm relational tone as you pursue leads, plan for off-market opportunities. Analysis, the ability. So the person who's good at generating leads may or may not be the person who's all that great at analysis. So the ability to slow down and focus on the particulars of a deal. There are plenty of people who are dabbling in the space or interested in real estate investing who are naive about what goes into analyzing and understanding whether a property works or not from the numbers standpoint. Biggest pet peeve is someone say, "Oh, look at this house. I'll make $1,000 a month on this." And it's like, well, are we talking gross rents? Because that's good. That's not what you're making. Let's not miss the expenses. You got to focus on the key metrics, accountability for, what does that say? Defense of an opportunity. So this goes back to having who's in your corner. When I've identified a property, and hopefully, again, regardless of your family situation, you've got someone, and my wife and I, we've literally established a process because she likes this stuff, but she doesn't geek out on it in the same way that I do. When I find a property and I've run the numbers, we sit down and I make a case for why it's a good property. Half the time we discover that it's not, I missed something, or, oh, I'm being naive to this fact. And so mounting a defense, kind of like in a trial sort of setting, say, hey, no, I've looked at the numbers, I've ran the calculator. I use the Bigger Pockets calculator to factor everything in.
Is that free?
It is. There is there's a free way to do it. They have a premium sign up where you get access to even more and you can use it in an unlimited fashion. But there's other calculators out there too. Bigger Pockets is where I spend.
It's worth it for Bigger Pockets because of how it breaks it down, but like you can find just Excel spreadsheets that people build. We'll send you. That's what I've used because it's free.
Yep.
Is that online? Or?
Yeah, biggerpockets.com. So Bigger Pockets is kind of I would say the online community for real estate investing today. There are other places, of course, but they've got a podcast, they got articles, they've got calculators. If there's a term that you hear someone use, like, I don't know what that means, go there and they've got a glossary to understand the terminology behind all of it. It's a really great community. Their podcast is awesome. I've really enjoyed it over the years. Skills associated with pursuit, negotiating skills, skills and relationships necessary to obtain financing. And I'll just say with negotiating, as an investor, you should always, we talk about being a motivated buyer or seller. You should always be a relatively unmotivated buyer as an investor. There's a landlord in a neighborhood that I'm focusing on right now who we've been playing footsie for the last 6 months. And by that, I mean, he's got a for sale by owner sign out there. I check in with him probably every 3 or 4 weeks. I don't hound the guy, but he's unmotivated seller. I'm an unmotivated buyer, and one of us will cave one of these points or not. He's got a number that doesn't work for me. I've got an offer that doesn't work for him. I came a little bit his way. I provided a little bit of rationale. If it doesn't work out, that's okay. Like you never get married to a deal. Whereas when you're purchasing your own home, you went, oh, I love this, or kids have to be in this school, or we're on the lake, or whatever. You shouldn't have that unless you're in the short-term rental game, in which case that stuff matters a little bit more. But
No deal better than a bad deal.
right, the ability to walk away is always essential. None of the deals that I've made, again, I'm talking about my deals. We currently have 6 doors. So it's not like I'm talking about an empire here by any stretch of the imagination. But none of the homes that we've purchased would I say was a home run. Oh, this is solid, fair deal, fair price. But we got fantastic tenants. We took good care of it. We've got leases that are friendly to us. And we have forever on our side. And so And some of them have turned out way better than we would have expected, because we never assumed appreciation. When appreciation happens, it's, oh, okay. That changes the equation.
So score runs on base hits.
There you go. I want to do that for next time. So next week, we'll talk a little bit more about, well, not a little bit more, a lot more about, hey, let's walk all the way through, not just a transaction, but from identifying all the way through stabilizing, which is when you're in truly more passive mode. But one of the things we'll do, and Preston, if I can actually ask you to be the one to bring a property next go round. Just an address, it could be
You want like a flip or a
buy and hold. Yep. But we'll evaluate it for all strategies. So just bring an address and we'll pull it up and we'll evaluate it.
You want MLS or just like something that I found?
MLS will give us the data.
Okay.
That will make it a little bit easier,
I think we can do that.
but I'll give you freedom. We can talk about it between now and
yeah.
then. Key terms for analysis. So some of you are going to be familiar with this stuff, and for some of you, this might be new. There is kind of jargon around the world of real estate investing. And like I said earlier, being able to analyze a property well is one of the core skills, one of the top two, I would say, in doing this the right way. So NOI, net operating income, equals your gross income minus operating expenses. Operating expenses. So let's just do a list here, and folks, you guys can unmute. Operating expenses do not include, so I'll just do NOI. Operating expenses do not include debt service. Just so we're clear there. So operating expenses, let's just build a list here real quick. What are examples of operating expenses in the owning of a home?
Taxes.
Taxes, yes.
Insurance.
Insurance.
Utilities.
Yep.
Steve Canton charges you $80 a year for property.
Yep. So city fees. What else?
Maintenance.
Yep. So when you say that, that's if
If you have a maintenance,
a repair, is that what you're saying?
no, I was actually thinking of like a manager, a property.
Oh, property manager. Yep.
But under maintenance, you have to assume every year there's going to be something.
Yep.
So we should come up with depending on the property percentage.
Right. So let's do a couple here. So maintenance is going to be, in my mind, this is how I approach it. It's the little stuff. It's the, a toilet has an issue, a fixture craps out.
Keys.
Sure. It's the stuff that you don't need to necessarily like, oh, I need to save up for this, but you're naive to not factor it in. Whereas capital expenditures, CapEx, is, hey, the roof doesn't need to be changed now, but it's going to need to be changed at some point in its life if I'm playing the long game, which I do. So let's say it's we've got 15 years left on a 20-year roof. Okay, what's an average roof cost? Let's divide that out. A roof going out should never be a surprise unless it was a major storm, and then you should have the insurance to help deal with that scenario. But an old roof, you saw that coming. A water heater, that's going to happen. That sort of stuff.
Lawn of snow service.
So I do, lawn and snow.
If you do it yourself, you can pay yourself. Well,
Right.
Well, if you have a snowplow. you do it
Right.
yourself.
But do you want to? I find ways to not do this. I get properties where it's not too much to ask a tenant to do that, which is one of the reasons why I like single family. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So even if you are planning on doing, hey, I'm the property manager, I'll take care of this stuff. I'll be the guy to fix this stuff up, because a property manager, just so you know, he's not the one fixing the toilet. He's the one finding the guy to fix the toilet. But he's the guy that people call, and he deals with the issue, but he's not doing it himself. So there's a couple layers there. But you might say, oh, I can get half price here because I'll be the one swinging that hammer. Even if you are going to take a higher level of activity in the business, factor this stuff in. Underwrite, and when I say underwrite, I mean analyze every element of the property with as much detail as possible, where, hey, oh, I don't mind managing. Well, someday you might. And let's factor that cost in. And in the meantime, you can pay yourself. And whether it's pay yourself by keeping it in the deal or actually paying yourself, that's your choice. But don't be naive. I think when people say, oh, I'm making this much, it means, oh, I get $1,500 a month in gross rents, and the mortgage only costs me $500 a month, so I'm making $1,000 a month. I don't know if I agree with that. One other one that is worth noting as well is vacancy. With both capital expenditure and vacancies, typically that's a percentage. 1% of the value of the property, 2%, whatever. If it's a $100,000 property, I want to save $1,000 a year to cover vacancies. Put something there just to get started, and the more you do it, the more fine-tuned. I was really conservative, like, oh, I got to have 10% vacancies, and I've had 0.1% vacancies over the course of 7 years. Okay, I can taper that down, but I don't want to be naive. A roof is going out. Or I just, we bought a property in St. Louis that we put a brand new, what's the surface called? It was a flat roof that they, yeah, it did no, it wasn't tar. They did I forget what it was called, but it's a 80-year roof. These roofs last forever. We had a terracotta roof, and those last forever as well. They're more expensive when you have to deal with them. But all that to say, factor the categories in. I'm going on a rabbit trail here. Adjust them. Yep, exactly.
What percentage do you use for capital expenditures?
I do 1% of the value of the property, and frankly, I should probably do more than that.
I've seen people calculate 5% of the rent coming in. That way it makes it a little easier to calculate it on a month-to-month basis. But it just depends, like he said, like what the property looks like and what you expect to come in.
So NOI, that's and this is, as you think about working with investors, this is a good one to know. All right. Cash on cash return. I put that on there. I don't think a whole lot about that. That's basically the money that you're investing. It's kind of a deeper dive on ROI, or return on investment. Cash on cash return is if I put $8,000 into the purchase and closing costs and paint for a property. That's a super low number. And in true profit, let's say I make $4,000 a year. That would be a 50% cash on cash return, if that makes sense.
They call it an interest rate that pays themselves back, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because like that percent will be the interest rate that you're getting back on that.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever works. ROI, return on investment, versus ROE, return on equity. I really like ROE, and for those who are really looking to grow something, ROI is based upon your initial investment. Hey, I put $10,000 in, and how much am I getting on that? ROE is what return am I getting on the existing equity in a property, which over time, as you're paying the debt down, gets worse. Because if you're holding your rents steady, let's just say, and every month as you're paying the debt down, unless your property is decreasing in value, your equity is growing. So you're earning less money on the more money that you're making. Doesn't mean that that's a bad thing, but once, in 1 year, you might have earned 20% on your money, and then 5 years down the road, you're earning 10% on your money. That's when people consider refinancing and taking money and doing something new. I haven't done any of that because I'm pretty conservative, but that's an interesting thing to look at as we think about holding our money accountable to growth. Cap rate. Lynette, you want to take a stab at cap rate?
Yeah, the cap rate is, your, it's your net operating income divided by fair market value.
So let's just run this briefly. So let's say you buy $100,000 property. It's a 1% property. Well, getting ahead of myself. So it makes $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year in gross rents. Your expenses, your operating expenses, the full list that we just came up with there are $5,000 or $500 a month, so $6,000 a year. Means that your actual your NOI, so just here, your NOI $6,000, and therefore your cap rate would be what?
What you said it was worth 1,000 or 100,000?
Correct.
6%.
Yep. So this is a 6 cap would be investor speak for this property. In some parts of the country, that's a decent number. In certain asset classes, that's a decent number. In residential real estate in Northeast Ohio, that's not a good number. You're shaking your head. What number do you like, Dee?
10 or 12.
Yeah. Yep.
But you can also fix it by adjusting rent and adjusting your expenses.
Yep.
Yes, it's okay if you start out, when you're first starting out, knowing that that figure is gonna be a little bit lower because you're putting some money in it, maybe some fix up or whatever, but if you know in a year or two, but after that.
Right.
you should be getting at least 10%.
Right, because if you're thinking about, so cap rate, for those of us who are leveraging our money and who are doing some borrowing, the cap rate may not feel like a real number because the cap rate is basically if you were to buy this cash, this is what it's earning. So if I put $100,000 cash into the purchase of this single family home and it's generating $6,000 a month, I'm earning 6% on my money, which I can do a lot better in the stock market in many years. You know, there's less control. And so if the stock market earns 10 or 12%, I want to make sure my money in the big sense. Now, if I'm leveraging your money, you know, a 6 cap leveraged might be more like you're earning 25 or 30% on your money, depending on how you leveraged it. But you always want to assume the cash purchase as you're working with investors, but also as you think about how your money is actually working. Because believe it or not, that leveraged money is still money that you owe. You know, that note you're still responsible for. And if things go sideways, you got to figure that out. The 1% rule. Does anybody know the 1% rule?
That's your rent to ratio value, so that's your monthly income divided by fair market value.
Correct. Yep. So $100,000 or $100,000 home should rent for $1,000 a month in order to meet the 1% rule. In Ohio, not so much in this market. There are still areas where you can, but you know that you can find a 2% rule. You can find that, you know, $35,000 house that'll rent for $700 a month. Now, do you want to deal with that house? That's a different question. But that's part of what draws international investor interest in this part of the country is that you can get really strong cash flows from a percentage point standpoint. Anyone know the 50% rule?
I've heard it. It's like you assume it takes half of the. I won't be able to say it. But
You're on the right track.
Assume half of your rent goes towards operating expenses.
Correct. Yep. So it's the 1% rule and the 50% rule are just a couple of kind of, I'll call it a quick and dirty rule, where just because a property doesn't meet the 1% rule, does that mean it's not a good investment property? No, not necessarily. Just because a property, So the 50% rule is going to be a little bit harder to see, but that's something as you are diving in on your analysis and looking at, okay, what are the taxes here? You know, you're running the calculator to make sure that you're not missing anything. If the expenses are more than 50% of your rents, you're probably not going to cash flow, depending on how you're financing the deal. That one requires a little bit more work. I like the 1% rule because understanding values in an area and understanding rents in an area is pretty easy. Okay, yeah, a 3-bedroom in this community that'll rent for $1,200 all day. Okay, they're asking $105 for it. It meets the 1% rule. We bought a home up in Northwest Akron. That was that kind of example. Okay, the 3-bedroom homes in this area are 100, 150. I know I can get $1,500 a month rents on this. We got ours for 95, and it happened to be a 4-bedroom. It passed the sniff test. For me, if it doesn't pass the 1% rule sniff test, I'm probably not going to look at it all that closely, which doesn't mean that there aren't deals out there that don't meet that or that aren't going to be good investments. But just from a time standpoint, that's my. Exactly. So my criteria, if I'm not cash flowing at least $250 per door per month, then it's probably not the best use of my time. And I'm a minimum 8%. If it's not going to make me an 8% cap, I'm not gonna look at it. I'd much rather be north of 10%. And in this market, you really can do that. St. Louis was a little bit harder, just because there was more appreciation that you could assume there. Thoughts, questions about those terms? All right, this is a bit of a case study, and then I think that'll be good for today. And next class again is going to be much more nuts and boltsy. So this is big picture, and we'll take a deep dive. So this is a look at our first purchase, and just to whether you need to be convinced of the power of real estate investing or the approachability of it. I think this is just a great example with real numbers to help flesh it out. So we bought this house in 2014 at 162.5. It was listed at 165. You know, like we found it on the MLS. It wasn't some exceptional, oh, you got to know a guy sort of scenario. It was in a pretty decent neighborhood. It was kind of a near an area that was really hopping and had, you know, the pubs and restaurants in the city of St. Louis. Very, you know, socioeconomically diverse area, safe from a crime stat standpoint. And we thought, hey, we're paying $700 a month now for our rent. If we could get a property where someone else pays, so we don't have to pay as much, that would be great. So we lived upstairs and rented the downstairs, had 2 kids in that house. It was a good time. Purchased 162.5, 5% down. So about $11,000 all in, including closing costs. No real expenses. We negotiated a few repairs, but we didn't pay anything out of pocket. From a repairs or rehab standpoint, it was in pretty good shape. 100-year-old home. I think a lot of times people get spooked by old properties. We have yeah. St. Louis is just chock full of old brick homes.
Well, sometimes they were built better though. Those
Yeah.
houses
Oh
were
yeah.
built
There's
last.
brick everywhere in St. Louis. And that's one thing that I like. If I can buy brick, you know, just the maintenance and having to deal with siding and paint, those sorts of things are going to be less of a deal. Lived in one side, rented the other for $700 a month, which covered 70% of our mortgage payment. Used the savings from reduced housing costs to save for the down payment of our next home. So we moved several times, and this is basically the one that got us started. 2016, we purchased a single family home with money from the house hack savings. We kept the duplex renting now for a total of $1,600 a month, so $800 aside. So bringing it up a little bit more to market rents. Over time, increased the rents, topping out at $1,800 a month, cash flowing about $500 a month after expenses. So $500 a month is okay. That you know, $250 a door. That's fine. We sold it just this past year for $225,000. which again, how often will you see that kind of appreciation in this market? Depends on the community, depends on the asset. We weren't banking on that. And there were several years where it was just kind of holding steady. I'm like, okay, I'm just assuming that this is about the same. And in the last couple of years, obviously things have picked up. We put the proceeds from the sale. So we've been paying it down, but so the equity that we were able to take from it, put it into a 1031 exchange to purchase 2 properties in the Akron area, including rehab costs and putting $10,000 back into our pocket. So 2 houses fixed up, rented, put some money back in, all from, and the 2 properties we purchased now cash flow for combined $975 a month.
They're leveraged, right?
Correct. But conventional products, 20% down, low interest rates. We didn't have to go through creative sources to find financing. Boring and simple. The more boring and simple you can keep things, the lower the risk you're probably taking on as a broad principle. But I bought it and we thought it was a decent deal. We needed a place. We liked the area. We could envision living upstairs from our neighbors. And I worked in admissions at a seminary, so I could pick our tenants. It was always seminary folks living downstairs from us, which was kind of fun. But if you look at those numbers, we put $11,125 into it, and then it turned into 2 more properties cash flowing, and basically that same amount of money back in our pocket at the end of the day. That's not a pat on the back scenario because we did plenty of things wrong, but just illustrative of how powerful this can be. We'll dive into some of that next go around. Getting ahead of myself. So next week is going to be or again, 2 weeks from now, real nuts and bolts. You'll need to track pretty close with what we're doing, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun because I love getting into the nitty gritty. If you could bring an address for us, that would be fun to begin the analysis process. Any questions or thoughts from those who've done it before? Or Dee, I know you've got more experience than I do, so I feel silly teaching the class that you could be teaching just as easily.
I wish we had done this a lot sooner. But it's worked out well. Our history was, I had a house, Bob had a house, we bought a third house, we got married, so we rented the other 2. So we instantly were able to work that out. And over the years, we flipped a couple. We invested in real estate where our son was going to school.
Mm-hmm.
So he lived in the unit, but he was a tenant. So we had tax advantages for the 4 years he was there, and we kept it an additional 3 years. We didn't see appreciation going quite as smooth, as much as we thought for the value. So it was time to turn it over after we had 7 years of nice tax advantages as an investment, write-offs or what have you. So at that time, we had acquired a couple properties, and we desired a second home in Florida. And so we did a 1031 exchange for a couple properties, and the first 5 or 6 years we did legitimately use it as an investment property. But after you own the property for 5-7 years, the government doesn't have the look back anymore. So it's a true second home for us, and we have it now for everywhere. So that's a nice thing to do. If you are looking to the future to have a second home someplace, and even if it's not, we ended up liking the area, so we stayed here, but we did it for the startup for it. I worked with an awful lot of investors when I first got my license because bank repos were handled locally, and I represented several banks, so I did have opportunities to see them come across very easily. I ended up selling a lot of them, but I wish I had invested in more of them. I did at the time. But that was a nice way, to do some properties. If I was going to give advice to anybody, I have to honestly say in 40 years of having rentals, I've never had a full eviction. Never. I had one get started, my one tenant from H, I did have to get an attorney involved, but they messed around with their own attorney and, you know, it was just a fluid situation. I didn't go with my gut in that situation. I knew that tenant probably wasn't gonna be a good tenant, but they pulled at my heartstrings because their baby just had brain surgery. And so my heart said, give them a chance. My gut told me, the new father in the situation is, excuse me, let's go. And that's what happened within a couple months. He wasn't paying rent. So we did have to get an attorney involved, but by the time it was all said and done, but I've never, ever had to go to eviction court. People ask me how or why. I think early on in working with some of my investors, we learned a phone interview before I even show a property. My application process is pretty sound, and I stick to my rules, the few that we have still. I do annual inspections, you know, I quiz them, I mean, they have to still continue to meet my standards, et cetera, and they know it. I do it in a pleasant way, but they know it. But I think the key that I learned was my phone interview. I got tired of showing properties to fly-by-nights that really didn't have the money, they weren't gonna meet my qualifications. And I was involved with the Fair Housing, with the Board of Realtors for many years and on their committee. And I learned very quickly what I could ask over the phone and what I couldn't, because I wanted to be proper and not jeopardize anything. But at the same time, I found out some really key questions. And so I eliminate an awful lot of my showings just over the phone. Because I end up asking them, okay, this is my criteria, I tell them what the income level must be, the job security, you know, my requirements, et cetera. And that's key, have the same requirements for everybody.
Don't want to get in trouble for.
You don't want to get caught. If anybody asks me, I can check them off real quick. And it's standard, I tell them that on the phone, so there's no, you know, tricks or anything. But some key questions I ask is, you know, I make it sound like it's off the top of my head, like, oh, how long have you been looking? You learn all kinds of stuff by asking some key questions. If they've been looking for 5 or 6 months, you know they've been turned down a lot, and there's something to be said there. Or they will instantly say, oh, you know, but I can't find the right landlord, or all these landlords expect this, blah, 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 or nobody wants the big dogs and the 5 cats and the 2, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It comes out because they're not expecting it.
Yeah.
But I have a little list. I will not take a phone call if I don't have my little cheat sheet. And once I did have somebody try to take me to Fair Housing saying I was discriminating. I never saw the lady, so I had no idea where she was coming from, what in this particular, you know, color was or whatever. But she tried to claim that when my son was mowing the grass, saw her and I discriminated, you know, whatever. And I said, nope. And I knew the girl at Fair Housing because, you know, I worked with the Board of Realtors an awful lot. And I said, nope, I asked the same questions. Here's my sheet of paper that I talked to her about, et cetera. I never saw her, you know, and they threw it out because at that point in time, they recommended, I suggested that to the board because I worked when the board was changing their leases. I was on the committee several times. And I'd be willing to go over my phone interview. I cannot give you a copy of it. And the reason is each individual person is expected by Fair Housing to come up with their own list of criteria. So if you want to put the list in a different order or change it or your terminology, go for it. Because I asked if I could share this, and Fair Housing always says, no, you know, each person should have their own criteria, whatever. But the questions I ask, and so at the end I say, okay, thank you for answering my questions. Here's what I'm looking for. Do you think you're a good fit for my property? Do you want to proceed or not? I will not show something because I don't want want to be caught not showing something. It's not in my heart anyways, but you know what I'm saying, I would, so, lots of times they'll say, nope, I don't think we're, and so I don't end up showing, so I don't waste my
Yeah,
running
don't waste
over
your
a
time.
property. The other thing I do is, when I'm showing properties, I try to pick a night or a day and I book 2 or 3 of them a half an hour apart. If I'm gonna spend my time going to a property, getting prepared, whatever, I might as well go for 3 people.
Yep.
And then instead of, so, I group them. If somebody's a no-show, so what? Once
Yep.
in a while there'll be a no-show. So that's really helped too.
That's fantastic.
But stick to, like I said, the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we turned some properties over and we have a paid-for condo in Florida that I can do every year now. And I have the cash flow of the properties and, I got down to a level that was now manageable at this time of our life. I have 6 doors that I'm taking care of right now. That's, a nice management for us. I personally never bought in the city.
Mm-hmm.
I did work the city of Canton and representing the board of realtors over the years. But I just chose not to play some of the games that the city of Canton, chooses to go through. So I've always stayed outside of the city. Not that I don't want to be responsible for my property, but I didn't want to become a potential slum landlord.
Yeah.
So everything I've ever owned has been outside of the townships, or we've owned. I say I because my husband has his own business, and since I was a realtor, I did most of it. But, and you do, like he said, you do have to find your own niche. For us, there's a few things that we'll do as time has gone on. We don't want to have to go over and stop a sink or do that kind of stuff anymore. So for us, we choose to, somebody do some of the maintenance and what have you. So before we did, and that was okay, but,
We are,
anyways, is that?
yeah, that's gold. I'm gonna have you come back next time and share a little bit more. Yeah.
Each city has their own inspectors and it's sometimes can be real pain.
In the interest of time and
It was
the,
horrible.
yep, and the folks that are on the screen here, I just want to ask briefly as we wrap up. A to Z encapsulates a lot. We're going to be getting pretty deep into details. For those who have an intention to return, is there a question or a particular category, whether analyzing, finding, managing, rehabbing, financing, that is most pressing of a highest priority for us to go deeper? And those on screen can answer as well.
I think just analysis.
Okay.
And not getting stuck with analyzing properties.
Okay. Analysis and the ensuing paralysis. Okay.
I think financing, like, you guys both mentioned the 1031 exchange.
Sure.
You can do it in reverse. There's a reverse 1031. When we bought the condo in Florida, we found the condo first, but we knew that the best way, because, was to use a couple of properties. So that's when we liquidated the college property, and you can designate, I think the laws have changed. I think at that time you could designate 5 properties. You don't have to sell all 5, but we designated 5 properties, and our goal was with 2 or 3 of those that would fund the property in Florida is what we were looking for. So we picked a couple of them.
And does that do a lender?
I'm going to just put a bow on this for the folks on the screen because they can't hear super well. We'll continue the conversation. Thank you all. Hang on just a quick second. We will see you 2 weeks from today at 2:00. We're going to dive deep on analysis, the tenant process, the financing, and we'll touch on rehab side of things as well. But I just wanted to put a bow on that. Appreciate your time. Appreciate y'all's time and continue the conversation.